everybody, and welcome to another one of our conversations here with Dan.
Sup?
Yeah, good to see you today.
Good to see you.
Good to see all of you out there, or possibly if you're listening, glad you're joining us on the podcast.
What's your favorite number, Jed, and why do you like that number?
I am one of those weird guys who likes 13 because it was so taboo.
Because the 13th floor, they skip it and all that stuff?
Yeah, that was always crazy to me. So I was like, I like 13. It's just a fun, odd number.
You are odd. That's true.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
That does pertain to today's question.
Yeah?
Because someone wrote in and asked, what is the importance of numbers, not the book of Numbers necessarily, but like actual 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers in the Bible? And so I guess first thing, is this like a numerology question of we're searching for hidden meanings and, when...
Numerology can be weird and go all over the place.
Okay.
But as I've read the Bible, I think numbers in the Bible find their significance from context and Bible story, not just that a number automatically everywhere has this significance. But
so we're not talking adding up the numbers and letters in a word and trying to combine to form some strange background thing.
No.
We're talking about like there were 12 apostles and there were 12 tribes and that sort of idea.
But we have to start with one is the loneliest number. Okay,
yeah.
so one is a big number in the Bible.
Okay.
But only because of certain context. There is one God. In John 17, in verse 20, Jesus was praying for his apostles, and then he says, "Neither do I pray just for these alone, but also for all those who would believe on me through their word." And what does verse 21 say?
It says, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me.
Okay, Jesus prayed that his people might be one. Now, there's not some weird significance to that, except everybody should be together. Everybody should be on the same page. There is one body, Ephesians 4:4, and one Spirit, even as you were called in one hope of your calling. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. So
it's like a singularness to this whole thing.
It's just that in those passages, there's a clear contextual significance to the word one. Ephesians 2:16, God reconciled Jew and Gentile to himself in one body. But you get that from Ephesians. There's one body. It's the church. All men are reconciled to the one God in the one church. I mean, that's just, it's not like there's some do-do-do-do, but it's just in the context, it's telling you about the unified God and the unified plan of God.
Okay.
So that's one.
That's one of one.
Yeah, and of course, we could think of the number 3. And the number 3, certainly, we've got Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in different orders and manners and different passages. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all,
Yeah.
So you've got the 3. That one is, I had a hard time thinking of places where that one was super significant. We've got definitely 4 a few places.
I was going to say on the 3, I've heard people jump to like the 3 temptations of Jesus and those, the 3 rooster crows, and they'll go to those different things.
But those books don't necessarily give any special significance to that.
So Ken, going to the significance comes from the context, not from the number itself.
That is absolutely right.
Okay.
Right. There are 4 living creatures.
Are we talking Revelation creatures?
We're talking Ezekiel creatures that flew around by the throne of God, which we meet again in the book of Revelation. Okay. And the holy city, Jerusalem, is 4 square,
Great game to play on the playground.
Yeah, that's got nothing to do with this. There were the 4 horsemen in Revelation 6, that had different meanings there, but the context pretty well gives you the meaning and not really any significance it may have some idea. You have the four corners of the earth in Revelation 7 starts out. Um, there seems to be sort of a every direction idea of the four.
Yeah.
But again, that comes from the context, and only if the context gives it some special meaning do you say, well, there's some particularly special thing about four.
Yeah. So again, we're not trying to draw lines between those different instances of four.
Right.
So like other than the creatures appearing kind of in similar contexts in similar spaces, we're not going to then start trying to equate the four creatures with the four horsemen and the four corners.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay. Because I think that's where some people will be going, okay, so what is the importance? And they're jumping into that sort of do-do-do-do sort of area. That's when they start going, okay, well, now we need to align modern people with each of those four because that symbolizes such and such. And
no, none of that as I can see. Now, there are certain things in Scripture where there is some degree of symbolism in a number.
Okay.
There is certainly in the Bible I don't know if you would call it symbolism, but a basic pervasive significance to the number 12.
Okay.
It goes back as far as Genesis to the 12 sons of Jacob.
Right.
Who was then called Israel because he fought with God.
Mm-hmm.
And then those 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel, which are listed off numerous times in the Old Testament.
Right.
And then, of course, Jesus chose the 12 apostles. Jesus called them one by one.
Peter, Andrew, James, and John.
There you go.
Yeah.
Then, on the high priests, you had 12 precious stones on the breastplate.
Yeah.
And you have 6.
They represented the tribes, didn't they?
Represented the tribes, and you have 6 on this shoulder and 6 on this shoulder that represented the tribes. And so, the 12ness there in the Old Testament was all about God and his choice of Israel and everything about his plan from Jacob to making Israel his nation. All that was wrapped up in when you said 12, all that stuff came to mind.
Yeah. And so do you think that on that level, it's more about what the 12 represents than the number itself?
Right, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, that's another example where the significance of the number, which speaks loudly in the Old Testament, comes from the story of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the context gives you the significance.
Okay.
But then Jesus goes ahead and chooses, 12 apostles.
Yeah.
And in Matthew 19:28, let's read that.
Okay. Let's go there. Matthew 19:28 says, Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel.
So there's a definite scriptural connection between the 12 apostles, the 12 thrones, the 12 tribes of Israel. So there seems to be an idea of the continuance of God's people, led now by these 12 apostles, 12 thrones, 12 tribes, coming over into the time of Jesus. And of course, Jesus says the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right.
And so certainly that number has significance. Now, when we go to Revelation, we are 12'd all over the place, of course.
Oh, yeah.
We get seriously 12'd in Revelation.
That just sounds bad.
Yeah, we get 12'd. So in Revelation 4, in the throne room scene, you have at verse 4, read there for us.
It says, surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders, and they were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads.
All right, so somebody, that's not 12, that's 24, but hang on for just a minute, because 12 of them's 224. But anyway, we have the 24 elders all through the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
And then if you go over to chapter 7 and verse 3, read 3 and 4 there.
It says,
this is Revelation 7, 3 and 4.
Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God. Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from the tribes of Israel.
All right, notice the ones that are being sealed are called in verse 3 the servants of our God.
Mm-hmm.
See, they're God's people.
Yeah.
How many of them are there? 144,000. Well, that's not 12, but look, when I was a kid and I was in school and I learned my 12 tums, 12 times 12 is what? 144. So you can't get any more 12y than 144. But here's a weird thing. When you look at chapter 7, verses 5 through 8,
5 through 8, yeah.
You see the listing of the tribes.
Each of those 12 tribes.
Yeah, but look at the first one listed. What's the first tribe listed?
It says the tribe of Judah.
And you won't find a single list of the tribes in the Old Testament that starts with the tribe of Judah.
Because he ain't the oldest.
But yeah, Reuben is. They all begin with Reuben.
Yeah.
But Jesus is called in chapter 5 the Lion of Judah.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus said in 19:28 of Matthew that his apostles were going to be ruling the 12 tribes. So the people of Jesus are the spiritual Israel. But notice also, and I'm offended by this, there's no tribe of Dan listed here. And so that's weird because he always is in the tribes in the Old Testament.
He's one of the sons.
So there's something weird in the neighborhood here. And when you look at, for example, the numberings of the tribes in Numbers chapter 1 and Numbers chapter 26, you'll have 76,500 in this tribe and 48,600 in this tribe and 52,900 in this tribe. And they're all different numbers, but what's strange about the number of all these?
Every one of them is numbered 12,000.
12,000, 12,000, 12,000.
Over and over.
See, we're being 12'd. And being 12'd means that this is God's people and God's things. That's clearly in the significance. Now, if you go over to chapter 12, which we're not even going to think about that because there were no chapters in the original Bible.
Yeah.
But if you'll read chapter 12, verse 1,
it says, a great and wondrous sign appeared in the heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head.
Okay, so if you read the book of Revelation, and there is definitely a connection between all the 12s, you know right away that this woman belongs to who?
To Christ, to God.
That's right, because she's got 12 stars on her head. And then, so that's very important. And of course, she's the one that gives birth to the child who's going to rule the nations. And then she's also the one that after the child, Christ, is caught up to heaven, the dragon persecutes this woman, see? And her children are said to be those that keep God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus in 12:17.
Right.
All right, so let's look at chapter 21. Chapter 21. And we're looking at verse 10. Read a little ways there.
Verse 10 says, and he carried me away in the spirit to a mountain great and high, and showed me the holy city Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. It shone with the glory of God, and its brilliance was like that of a very precious jewel, like jasper, clear as a crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and with 12 angels at the gates. On the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel.
So see all the connections between these things going all the way back to the beginning of the Bible?
And we're not having to put red string on a wall to figure this out.
No, it's just from what we read throughout the Bible. See,
okay.
12 tribes, Jesus' people, the 12 apostles. Keep going in 14.
It says the wall of the city had 12 foundations.
Oh, look at that.
And on them were the name of the nations, and on them were the name of the 12 apostles of the Lamb.
Notice the connection again between the 12 apostles and the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah.
So this is not an artificial connection.
Right.
But it's a connection made by Jesus, Matthew 19. It's a connection that's made repeatedly here in the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
It arises from the story of God's people.
Again, it's that it's the significant or a thematic element. It's It's the shorthand for all of this other history.
That is exactly right. That's
Okay.
different than numerology.
Gotcha.
It's arising from the Bible story.
Okay.
Look at verse 16.
16 says, "The city was laid out like a square, as long as it is wide. He measured the city with the rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia in length."
All right, and some of you out there have versions that try to put that measurement in modern day measurement, and they mess it up because they get rid of the 12, which is obviously important to the writer of the book of Revelation. So I appreciate the NIV of 1984 for doing this. It kept the 12. Look at verse 17.
He says he measured its walls, and it was 144.
Uh-oh.
There's the number again.
Now, see, does that help me think that the 144,000 and the 144 here might be buddies, like holding hands or something?
Probably.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
See, and it all arises from the story. And, of course, drop down to 21, we can run this into the ground.
Yeah, 12 gates with 12 pearls, each made with a single pearl, and keep going from all the descriptions there.
So obviously, one more, just so we won't miss something important. In the description of the river of life flowing down through the street of the city, chapter 22, verse 2.
It says, "Down the middle of the great street of the city, on each side of the river, stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree are for healing of the nations."
All right. And if you cross-reference Ezekiel 47, verse 12, you'll find the same thing in the Old Testament. So, again, in this situation, the number 12 has extreme significance as an identifier of God's people and God's things as per the entire history of the Bible.
Yeah.
And we don't want to go too long, but one more real quickly.
I was going to say, there's probably one number that everyone's going, why haven't they talked about that one yet?
The number 7?
I think so.
The number 7. Okay, so in the book of Revelation particularly, and we could talk about this in other places, but in the book of Revelation particularly, structurally, the book is divided up into the letters to the 7 churches, and then you've got the 7, in chapter 6, the 7 seals.
Right.
And then you have the 7 trumpets in chapters 8 and 9. And then in 15, 16, you have the 7 vials or bowls of wrath that are poured out. And those are kind of structural dividers of 7s.
Yeah.
But go to chapter 5, for example.
Okay.
By the way, the 7 churches of Asia, when you look at all the 7s in Revelation, they seem to say something about completeness or perfection. And so 7 churches. Now, since it's in Revelation, and we have lots of 7s, and they have significance as 7,
Sure.
does that literally mean that it was just those 7 churches, or does it mean all of the churches in Asia? See, I know it lists them, but still you have that 7.
Yeah.
Look at Revelation chapter 5.
Okay.
Go down to about verse 4 or 5 where he introduces the Lamb.
I wept and wept.
Yeah.
It's right there. Verse 5, the one of the elders said, "Do not weep." Yeah, okay. Let's start at verse 5. "Then one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scrolls and its 7 seals.' Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing in the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and elders. He had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are 7 spirits, the 7 spirits."
All right. So in the Old Testament, particularly in the book of Daniel and in other places, this would take a long time, but horns have a significance of power. And in the book of Daniel, in chapters 8 and 9, you've got the conflict between the Grecian Empire and the Persian Empire, and these are 2 beasts that have horns, and one beast breaks the horns of the others and destroys his power. And throughout, horns represent power. So the the lamb has 7 horns, which makes no sense because we usually think of lambs as real docile, and everything.
Yeah.
But here's a lamb that has 7 horns, which is all power, complete power. And he
Okay.
has 7 eyes.
Yeah.
And if you have 7 eyes, then you see everything.
Yeah.
See, you've got complete sight of everything.
So whereas when we were talking about 12, we were referencing back to these are God's people.
Yep.
7 is going to be that representation of complete perfection. That
Yeah,
sort of
and
idea.
you derive that from the way it's used in different places, especially like in Revelation and in apocalyptic literature. But if we had time to go through all the references, 7 has the idea of completeness. And it's weird that while the beast, who's the opponent of the lamb, has 7 heads, he's got 10 horns. T-E-N, not T-I-N.
Yeah.
And 10 doesn't have the same significance as 7 does. See,
Okay.
he's got a lot of horns, but he doesn't have 7 horns. See,
So is that a theme, like you said, if we went through every reference, it would take a long time sort of thing.
yeah.
But does it go all the way back to we have the 7 days of creation? Like, does it start there and carry forward? Or is that example of
There are lots of 7s, like you're talking about, 7 days of creation, the 7th day, Sabbath day, but not in the same way as the 12s. The 7 seems to, it may carry over into that because it was the complete creation and all that stuff, but particularly in Revelation and in the apocalyptic literature, 7 has the idea of completeness, which brings us to one more. We got 2 more real quick.
Okay.
The 3.5.
Not one I would have had on my list.
Yeah, is that not your favorite number? 3.5. Okay, but
Yeah.
3.5 derives its significance from 7.
Okay.
Because
Fair enough.
if you go to Daniel 7:25, which prophesies about the great persecution under the Roman Empire, which we read about in the book of Revelation.
Might help if I get in the right section of prophets here.
Daniel 7,
Never
Ezekiel,
mind.
Daniel.
I know.
Daniel chapter 7.
That's what happens when you're in a different Bible than usual.
Yeah,
Everything
right.
Feels different. All right,
Yeah.
Daniel, which chapter?
Daniel 7, verse
Daniel
25.
25. It says, "He will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and the laws. The saints will be handed over him for a time, times, and half a time."
See, a time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5.
Okay.
Now, 3.5 is only significant because it's only half of 7. So it's not complete. It's
Okay.
an incomplete period of time. But when you get to, there's also a reference to the time, times, and half a time when the power of the holy people is broken in Daniel chapter 12.
Okay.
We won't read that one right now. But in the book of Revelation, you have a period of time that's built off of this 3.5, and it's presented in 3 ways.
Okay.
It's a time, times, and half a time.
Right.
That's 3.5.
Gotcha.
Or it's 42 months. Divide
Okay.
that by 12.
Yeah.
Or it's 1,260 days. Divide that by 30.
Good
So
gracious.
if you have 1,260 days and divide it by 30, you get 42 months. If you have 42 months and you divide it by 12, you get 3.5.
Yeah.
See? So
it's different numbers, but they all boil down to the same thing.
those are 3 different ways of presenting the same number, and those numbers, which are all the 3.5 in
Yeah.
different forms, they represent the time when God's people under the Roman Empire were being persecuted, as foretold in the book of Daniel, a time, times, and half a time.
Okay.
See? But again, it derives its significance from the context.
Yeah. So don't go, even with all of that, some, especially those of you who aren't like math inclined people, are just going, that was too much. But don't go trying to find 3.5 in all the random spots in the Bible.
No.
It's when it's specifically stated in the context to tell you exactly what that
Right.
number meant.
Right. There's no
Okay.
like mysterious significance just to the word 3.5.
Yeah.
Okay. Then one more and we're out of here.
Okay.
All right. Revelation 13. This is everybody's favorite.
Oh, I bet I know what this one is.
Revelation 13.
Yep, I see it.
And I want you to go down to verse 17 and 18.
Okay. So that no one could buy or sell, sorry, unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666.
All right. Now, the number 666 also derives its significance from 7. Because 7, see, is the complete and perfect number.
Right.
But this, as most translations translate it, is a man's number. So what were they doing with the beast? The beast was commanding that people do what with him?
We're supposed to worship him.
Worship him.
Yeah.
But he's not God, which would be 7, 7, 7. This is just a man's number. 6, 6, 6. And so the only significance to that is he's just a man. Don't worship him. He's not God. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all of it that's there.
Yeah. So it's kind of could you say it's a close but no cigar type number?
Exactly.
Like it's not tied to it. It's not part of it. It's not
He's
half
imperfect.
of it. It's just.
But it tells you in the verse, it's the number of a man. That's where you get the significance. It's a man's number. And if you read the whole chapter, the beast was commanding that people worship him as God, you know?
Right.
And if people didn't worship him, they couldn't do this. But here's wisdom, people. His number is just 6. It's just the number of a man. And repeated in Revelation are the two short words that encapsulate the theme: worship God. See, in the last chapter of Revelation, the angel falls down, or John falls down to worship the angel, and he says, "Don't do that. Don't do it. I'm just a created being. Worship God."
So, in this sort of, and especially with this number, we shouldn't like walk past that number and get like tingles down our spine, and we're super worried, and it's like in all the scary movies, something crazy is going to burst out of the door or something.
And you could have like on your blazing forehead, like 6, 6 in you. No, that's not what it is.
That's not what that is.
No.
So it's not a significant number in every time you see this, it's going to represent the devil and all of his, minions and whatever.
He tells you in the verse, it is the number of a man.
Meaning, don't worship him.
That's it. That's all there is there.
Okay. So yeah, numbers are, it's funny. Some people have no time for this. They're like, whatever. But then other people can really fall down some rabbit holes.
Yeah, Jed. 1 is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. 2 can be as bad as 1.
Because we might get like a copyright infringement. We sing too much of it.
Uh-oh.
We don't want to mess with that.
And with that, folks.
So there are numbers of significance, but let the Bible tell you what the significance is.
Yeah, and most of them are pretty much explained by the context of the Bible.
Okay. Well, we hope that answered your question. Thanks for sending that one in, and we've got lots of others we're going to be working through. And as always, comments, questions, we appreciate all the follow-up from these things. Let us know where you're listening from. It's always great to know kind of how far and wide these things spread. So thanks again, Dan. And
thank you for sharing your favorite number, Jed, which was the number 13.
That's what this episode has been brought to you by. Bye, everyone. Bye.